Alright, welcome back to Whence, a Freemasonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. I'm your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Well, news for this week, I'd like to ask you all to check out Brother Rob Walk's blog. It's a very good blog, it's on Tumblr, and it's called On Freemasonry and Humble Pie. Brother Rob Walk brings a really fresh kind of look at the degrees. He is kind of live reporting as he gets degrees, as he learns things, and so we as brothers can almost relive our experience through his posts. I think they're really good, they're well written, and I encourage you all to check them out. Next week, we will be interviewing Brother Mike Shirley, Midnight Freemason and author of Daily Influences, Meditations for Servant Leaders. He is the chairman for the Grand Lodge of Illinois Leadership Development Committee, and I'm inviting you all right now to send me questions to ask him on the interview. Send your questions to wcypodcast@gmail.com. It's a good chance to ask someone who has a lot of experience within leadership and lodges. Send some questions and we can get them answered. Backtracking a bit to Brother Rob Walk, I offered to help Brother Walk out with his Entered Apprentice Catechism, and I believe Bill Hosler did as well, but we found out the hard way that our states, even though AF and AM they are, our obligations are quite a bit different. So it made it too difficult. We did give up, but nevertheless, it was really good to finally chat with him on the phone. Speaking of Brother Bill Hosler, author of the popular fiction-based Masonic stories called The 50-Year Mason, has some great new stuff coming up on the Midnight Freemasons and has been doing a really amazing job on our Instagram feed. So, Brother Bill, a public thank you for all that you're doing. I did make a new website for my home lodge, which is pretty fun. We stopped using the website for a while because service was shoddy. And to be frank, we could get away with just using a Facebook feed instead. It was easy. But what we found out was that some brothers just don't like or don't have a Facebook. So rather than have them sign up for something new, we offered a website now. Again, and this time it's just a blogger page, and we keep a calendar with meeting dates on there. Something some of you might want to consider who have lodge Facebook pages but not an actual website. Anyway, I'd like to get started with this week's first paper. Now, a couple weeks ago, Mathew Taheri, a brother, sent me a piece of his own writing, which was for his lodge education. He sent me another one, and I'd like to read it for you now. It's called A Handshake for Hermes. And now for mind-numbingly interesting history. Many of us have previously heard a phrase, as above, so below. Those who have not yet heard this phrase will see it repeated again and again in pursuit of Masonic education, for these very words are within every book I have read on the topic of Freemasonry. This phrase originates in the Hermetic Corpus, a series of texts relating to philosophy and spirituality, or originating in the 2nd century. The purported author of these books was Hermes Trismegistus, or Hermes Thrice Great, in ancient Egyptian and Greek. While the origin of Hermes is far too ancient to thoroughly examine in a short article, it is likely that a group of philosophically minded individuals authored the book under a configuration of the names of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. Those of you who are well into your studies may recall that some documents trace our philosophical roots, if not our origin, back to the philosophical scholars of ancient Greece and the academies of Egypt. The phrase itself has often been interpreted religiously to mean that heaven is a model of earth and earth is a model of heaven. Some have gone further to say that our experiences in the mortal realm influence our experiences in hereafter. Other cultures have adopted this phrase and interpreted it in a pseudo-alchemical spiritual manner. Given the season, what you in less spooky fashion, what you do on a small scale causes effects on a larger scale. The origin of this principle lies in Hermeticism. Worry not. The founding fathers of the modern incarnation of our organization were certainly not practitioners of voodoo. They were, however, privy to the philosophical theories being suppressed in the dark years of the 17th century. Hermeticism was almost certainly one of these theories, and one may recognize Hermetic theory within the allegory of our rituals. While not focusing on any mystical interpretation, we do teach that what we do within our own organization can affect the world at large. We make ourselves into better men, so that we might be better Masons, and thereby better citizens, better leaders, etc. We rightfully believe that building just one good man, so below, can affect the entire world, as above. Consider that George Washington was just one man, that Ben Franklin was just one man, that each reader of this article is just one man. Also consider that every worshipful master started as an entered apprentice, and that the lodge is in large part guided by the will of the current worshipful master. The belief that one man can affect community, large or small, has at its heart the philosophy of Hermeticism. While Hermeticism and the philosophy is open to interpretation, the interpretation lastly stated is our heritage. Again, thank you very much to Brother Taheri for sharing that. A brilliant piece as usual. And for those interested, I will have it as the PDF document, and it will be downloadable. And please, 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 if you are going to use that document in any publication or read it in lodge, please attribute it to Brother Mathew Taheri. He will appreciate that. Next, I want to quickly mention our apps which let you listen streaming and give you access to these papers that we read and Masonic wallpapers for your mobile devices. The apps are available for Windows 8, Android, and Apple. All proceeds go into the show, not my pocket. The money is only used to keep this show going. Also, we are on Stitcher Smart Radio, and you can support the show by downloading Stitcher for free, registering for free, and using the promo code Whence with no spaces. When you do that, Stitcher Smart Radio sends us $1. Additionally, if you like, you can do some shopping with On It Labs, makers of Alpha Brain and Hemp Force Protein. Just visit wcypodcast.com, which is our website, click on the links for On It, and a little bit of the sale comes back to the show. Also, a way of saying thanks, you can use the coupon code WCY and get 10% off your order. If none of these sparks your interest, you can, of course, just donate a few dollars via PayPal. The link is on our website as well, and is totally secure. It's run through PayPal. So thank you for all of your support. I wanted to mention something really cool that we are doing on the Midnight Freemasons, starting the last week before Halloween. So this comes out on Sunday, the first Monday after. We are going to be running 2 very cool, magical / Halloween posts, and I'd encourage you all to check them out and share. They're really good pieces. One is by James Fry, and the other is by Brother Steve Harrison. So again, please, if you haven't done so yet, stop by the Midnight Freemasons Facebook page, drop a line, click like, and share it with your brothers and friends. Next, I have a piece, and it's called Huts and Sheds, Early Lodges by Howard R. Stewart, M.D. Brother Stewart is a past master of the Texas Lodge of Research. His book, Huts and Sheds, from which this Short Talk Bulletin was taken, was chosen by Research Lodge No. 2 in Iowa as its featured book for 1997. Copies of the book, Huts and Sheds, may be ordered through Iowa Research Lodge, P.O. Box 3643, Des Moines, Iowa, 50322. The price is $10 each, so you can check that out if you want to get a copy of the entire book. The paper goes like this. In its primary Masonic sense, the word lodge appears in documents of the 13th century and later to describe the workshop, or hut, common to all sizable building works, in which the masons worked, stored their tools, ate their meals, and rested. These words by Harry Carr and similar words by others persistently raise questions such as, why were phrases like, in its primary Masonic sense, and, from a Masonic point of view, used in conjunction with lodge? For 2 reasons, perhaps. First, some believe that the earliest lodges were Masonic lodges, while others do not. Second, the word lodge is not uniquely Masonic. Masons did not invent it, they borrowed it. As yet, nobody has solved the mystery surrounding the origin of Masonic lodges. Perhaps like most human institutions, they evolved from the accumulated needs and experiences of mankind. D.D. Dara drew the following analogy. No man discovered law, or can locate its beginning. No man invented education, or can name its birthplace. Nor is it possible to state when religion took its place in the moral sphere of men. These great forces spring from the needs of the human soul, and are the result of growth and development. The same is true for Freemasonry. It was not created, but grew out of a past. I find it easy to agree with Dara. A study of the distant path reveals little bearing resemblance to modern Masonry, but does reveal traces of human longings and aspirations that have served as building blocks for society and brotherhood. Fortunately, the key to our thought today is realism, as seen in this statement by contemporary Masonic historian Wallace MacLeod. Quote, we can say with certainty that modern speculative lodges descend in unbroken line from British craft masons of 600 years ago. Earlier than that we cannot go. End quote. MacLeod's statement echoes the thoughts of many Masonic scholars, but it does not rule out the presence of lodge activity before that time. Keep in mind that advanced building techniques were in use as early as the 11th century, and it is possible that lodge activity was occurring in the huts and sheds of the builders, at least at the larger cathedral construction sites. I offer the following abstract from the work of Albert G. Mackey and Christian Stieglitz, not as proof, but as a point for debate. Please keep in mind that although the account can be partially documented, it is by no means proven fact. Quote, "It appears that from the 8th to the middle of the 12th century, most of the knowledge and practice of architecture was under the control of monks. As a rule, bishops supervised the construction of churches and cathedrals. One of these ecclesiastics was the English monk Winfrid, who was elevated to sainthood for his efforts in Christianizing Germany in the 8th century. Winfrid organized a group of monks for the practice of building who became known as masters of the works. Some were involved in design, some in sculpture and painting, some in gold, silver, and embroidery, and some in stonemasonry. Laymen were hired when needed as assistants and laborers, and through this intimate association much knowledge of the building trade passed to the laity. As more and more edifices were erected, a more intelligent class of builders emerged who ultimately formed their own brotherhoods and were granted certain privileges and franchises by municipal authorities. In addition, similar fraternities of builders arose in France and Italy, and by the middle of the 11th century, virtually all important building in Europe was in their hands. Under the name of traveling Freemasons, they passed from nation to nation constructing castles, public buildings, churches, and cathedrals. Of their organizations and customs, famed architect Sir Christopher Wren said, quote, "Their government was regular, and where they fixed near the building in hand they made a camp of huts. A surveyor governed as chief. Every 10th man was called a warden, and overlooked each 9. End quote. Stories like this may be true or false, or an admixture of both. The same can be said for the following, but it is closer to reality, being well documented for the most part. In the cities of England, associations called craft or trade guilds sprang up around 1100 AD, made up of men who worked at a common trade. In addition to these, there were groups of highly specialized builders who were unattached and were free to seek work wherever their special talents were needed. Usually, the latter were to be found in the suburbs or countryside, at cathedral construction sites. As a rule, there was no housing at these sites, so they built huts and sheds for living quarters, workshops, and places to assemble. Many historians have mentioned these structures, and it is generally felt that these were the lodges referred to in the old manuscripts and other records. The earliest reference to a lodge yet discovered is to be found in Masonry's oldest known document, the Regis Poem, reputed to have been written around 1390 AD. In a verse concerning apprentices we find, "His master's counsel he keep and close, and his fellows by his good purpose. The privities of the chamber tell he no man, nor in the lodge whatsoever they do. Whatsoever thou hearest or seest them do, tell it no man wheresoever you go. The counsel of all, and even of Bower." Since these lines also made it clear that there were secrets to be kept, a deeper meaning for lodge was suggested even before the start of the 15th century. A glimpse at the character of lodges established before the mid-16th century, whether Masonic or otherwise, can be gained from looking in places where continuing building was occurring, for there more stable conditions existed and better records were kept. At such sites, the builders were a family of workmen dwelling together under the guidance of a master builder and his wardens. Many workmen spent their entire lives in one lodge, since more than a century was required to complete a large cathedral. Brotherhood was paramount, and unification existed in the sense that a traveling stonemason, if qualified, was welcome in any lodge. One of the earliest accounts of such a lodge can be found in the building records of the Val Royal Abbey for 1278 AD. That a man was paid to clean out the lodge is recorded in the books of the Chapel St. Stephen in Westminster in 1320 AD, and in the records of Carnarvon Castle for 1321 AD. There is an entry of 2s.6d for straw to cover the mason's lodge. In 1395 AD, officials of Westminster Abbey paid, quote, I5s.6d to a dauber for the Lodge of Masons in Tottle Street. Lodges are also mentioned at Canterbury Cathedral in 1429, Aberdeen, Scotland in 1483, and at St. Giles Church in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1491 AD. Entries such as these prove the existence of lodges but prove nothing Masonically. From the late 14th through the 18th century, over 100 manuscripts were discovered, which many consider to be the most important discoveries in the history of Freemasonry. Collectively, these are called Gothic constitutions, and curiously enough, all contain words, descriptions, and rules of conduct that smack of the governing of Masonic lodges. It is as if they were all patterned after one original. The first to be discovered was the Regis poem, also known as the Halliwell MS, which was written around 1390 AD. It is probable that the first few of these were written by priests or monks for the use of lodges at cathedral construction sites. Much of Masonry's customs and uses have come from these precious documents, and historians have offered them as proof that organized Masonry existed before 1717 AD, the year of the formation of the first Grand Lodge. Harry Carr was among those who felt that the old manuscripts were primarily intended for the regulation of semi-permanent groups of Masons brought together in the course of their work who were out of reach of the established trade guilds. Among other things, he pointed out that the first of the old manuscripts made provision for an oath of obedience to be taken by a new apprentice, thus suggesting some sort of admission ceremony. In later versions, a posture to be assumed while taking the oath was suggested as well as secret signs and words. Carr gave credence to the concept of lodges having existed from at least the 14th century by pointing out the codes and ordinances regulating times of work and refreshment in the lodge, which were found at York Minster dated 1370. The reference to the Masons of the Lodge at Canterbury Cathedral in 1429 accompanied by a list of names, the use of a secret mode of recognition in Scotland, and reference to the Mason's word from 1637 AD on. This apparently led Carr to the definition for a lodge. Quote, an association of Masons, operative or otherwise, who are bound together for their common good, and who share a secret mode of recognition to which they are sworn on admission. End quote. The term Masonic Lodge has also borne other meanings at one time or another. 1. A place where Masons meet. 2. A group of Masons duly assembled for work. And 3. A piece of furniture representing the Ark of the Covenant, or in England, the tracing board. An acceptable as well as formal definition of a Masonic Lodge has been cut and dried since 1723 AD, when the, quote, charges of a Freemason, to be read at the making of a new brethren, or when the master shall order it, appeared, end quote. This definition was adopted in substance by the Grand Lodge of Texas in 1920 and appears as follows in Article 13 of its Constitution of Lodges. A lodge is a place where Masons assemble and work. Hence, that assembly or duly organized society of Masons is called a lodge, and every brother ought to belong to one, and to be subject to its bylaws, and the general regulations of the General or Grand Lodge hereunto annexed. In ancient times no master or fellow could be absent from it, especially when warned to appear at it, without incurring a severe censure, until it appeared to the master and wardens that pure necessity hindered him. The persons admitted members of a lodge must be good and true men, free-born, and of a mature and discreet age. No bondmen, no women, no immoral, scandalous men, but of good report. We have seen that in the Middle Ages the operative stonemasons met in huts and sheds and at construction sites in which they received instruction, dressed their stones, and partook of fellowship. Is it so hard to accept that these huts and sheds were more than just shelters or rooms? In 1921, H.L. Hayward said it may be that the body of Freemasonry as we know it came into existence only 200 years ago, but the soul of Freemasonry, its spirit, many of its principles, and its symbols have been among men from a time since which the memory of man runneth not to the contrary. Alright, next I want to talk to you about Masonic outreach. This is a new segment on the show, and I think it's really important. It is the other half of what we do. It is what the profane see and what our brothers benefit from. I recently started working with the Grand Lodge of Illinois, sitting on the charity committee, and part of what I do is to promote the Illinois Grand Lodge charities, but as I will always tell you, please remember the stories that I read are just a few, and your own state Grand Lodges have tons of stories just like these, and I encourage you to look into and help support your Grand Lodge charities, no matter what state or country you reside. So to set the stage for this one, I'd like to tell you about how our Illinois Masonic Outreach Service is helping one of our surviving spouses. This lady is a 77-year-old widow whose husband was a 38-year Master Mason at the time of his death. This widow has a history of mobility impairments and has been diagnosed with a brain tumor. She has cognitive deficit, requiring additional assistance throughout the day. For these reasons, her husband always took care of the finances and bill payments. She was at a complete loss after his death. She lives solely on Social Security income, which is not enough to pay her monthly expenses. She indicated that without the Masons, she would be quote-unquote homeless. This is how the Illinois Masonic Outreach Services assisted. She has been granted $250 per month, which will allow her to remain in her living quarters at a senior living facility. And she was always told by her husband that his brother Masons would take care of her, should she ever need their help. She never realized what he meant until he was gone. So again, another amazing way Masonic charities are helping out folks in need, specifically helping out within our fraternity, our widows and our orphans, and just brothers in need. Again, if you haven't yet, please check out your Grand Lodge websites and click to see what charities they are involved in. Donate a few dollars, because there are brothers and widows and orphans who need the help. Next is this week's famous Freemason. Now, I've got a lot of people who email me and write to me, and they're from the lodges in the Philippines. So I thought it was only right to bring up a famous Filipino Freemason, Graciano Lopez Jaena, born December 18th, 1856, and he passed away on January 20th, 1896, was a journalist, orator, revolutionary, and a national hero from Iloilo in the Philippines, who is well known for his newspaper, La Solidaridad. Philippine historians regard Lopez, along with Marcelo H. del Pilar and Jose Rizal, as the triumvirate of Filipino propagandists. Of these three ilustrados, Lopez was the first to arrive in Spain and have founded the genesis of the propaganda movement. On December 18th, it is Lopez's birthday and is a public holiday every year in Iloilo City. In his honor, the Hero Plaza has been renamed the Graciano Lopez Jaena Park, where there is also a statue of him. The Graciano Lopez Jaena Foundation Incorporated works to continue his legacy and supports various public recognition of his life and works, such as the Dr. Graciano Lopez Jaena Poetry Contest. In Order of D. Malay Chapter, a youth fraternal group for young men originating in Freemasonry, was founded around 1965 in Harrow and named Graciano Lopez Jaena Chapter because Lopez was the first and foremost Freemason from Harrow. He was worshipful master at Loggia Coverner Lodge number 2. I'm almost positive I mispronounced quite a bit of things in the language, and I do apologize for that. That's it for this week. Please remember to find us on Facebook and follow on Twitter at Whence. Please also find the Midnight Freemasons on Facebook and give them a like as well. We have 3 new articles every week on the Midnight Freemasons. It's a tremendous effort to bring you the coolest and most relevant Masonic-related new material on the web. Please visit twtmag.com, which is the Working Tools magazine, to get your subscription to the Working Tools magazine and read some exceptional Masonic writing, as well as the exclusive Midnight Freemason section available only in the Working Tools magazine, which will print articles unique to the magazine. So check out our Masonic businesses as well by clicking the links to Brother Jeff Koch's page, PB&J Water, for all your water purification needs, all parts and services made and performed right here in the United States. Also, please visit Brother John Paul Gomez's website, fraternalties.com, for the finest Masonic neckwear you can get anywhere. Please remember to check out our podcast partners, Brother Juan Sepulveda at the Winding Stairs podcast and Brother Rob Lewis on the Far From Centered podcast. You can follow them respectively on Twitter at Winding Stairs 33 and Robert P. Lewis, and also FFC. Until next week, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson.